各位女士、各位先生，我想接下去我就用英文来进行我们的讨论，因为有2位讲者让他们能够比较清楚。但是各位如果有问题，我们有2个方式，一个您可以直接举手提问，那我们来做互动的讨论。但是我不晓得有没有发言单？有，也可以写发言单，然后交给我们同仁到我这个地方会诊，我来协助提，所以中英文不拘。Okay, start from now. We are going to proceed our discussion section with English. Okay. Even our audience give us the hangout with Chinese, I'm going to translate into English. Okay. Now we'll open the floor for everybody. OK，
各位好，我像刚那个演讲部分都很精彩啊，我特别有2个问题想请教一下。第一个问题是关于那个大概是黄这边哈，就是有关于未来的趋势，在台湾，尤其在中小企业要走入用这个政策的话，到底应该往什么路上去走？因为我们有听过印度在发展的时候，它发展出一个叫做 paper car， 就是用很简单的材料，最简单的材料来做汽车。但是国内来讲，我想在汽车产业不是要做这一块，而是很多的产品要 reusable、recycle 的材料，或者根本就是以废弃物重新来做。像大概知道那个慈济大爱他们在做的一些用的产品，可能是用 PVC 来完成的。但是我们想在中小企业里面有很多的那个材料来源，台湾是非常有限资源的。那么我们在这个中小企业的时候，怎么来配合来做的事情？这第一个问题。第二个问题，我要特别请教一下，应该是 Florian Gabriel 哈，这是我们的瑞士 technology 的 expert。那我们知道瑞士它在国际上有推很多的产品，那这些产品里面啊，大概跟这个 green technology 就是绿色科技这一块非常有相关。但是我们不晓得我们的台湾，我们怎么来跟你们来做一些学习跟接轨？因为有一些技术都是专利的部分，那在台湾有没有可能做转移，或者我们用另外一个方式来合作，一起来研发？我想就这2个问题，谢谢。
我就针对您第一个问题啊，就是中小型企业就是针对这个 material I gotta speak English, right?
Yeah, 我想这样子。I'm sorry, I prefer to let our speakers speak English because this is a panel, so I like to have uniqueness for our panel.
Okay. So my first point will be by 2020, the recycle industry will become a mainstream industry. For example, like when we look at the aluminum industry, steel industry, for those kind of mineral material in 21st century is going to face the challenge of complete exhaustion year within 21st century. So we gotta, if we evaluate the sustainability of the steel industry or aluminum industry, so one very important key indicator is how much recycle rate can be reached. For example, like the steel industry currently, based on the electronic product or car, then we recycle the steel. At this moment, it's 85% of the steel material has been recycled. But for the future several decades, the target is to improve the recycling rate up to, for example, like more than 95%. So a lot of recycled material to be reused again for the new product new product design will be also a mainstream. That is for the recycled material. I think that will be also a very good way for the SME to invent your product. But another way is, as I know that a lot of Western industries, one of the very key focus area is to try to explore another new alternative material to be used in the product design, especially like the bioplastic or biomaterial. You can use a lot of material from bamboo or non-food plant-based material. We know that the bioplastics might have some challenge against to the food production, like corn production. So you want to produce the bioplastic from corn might be a challenge, but it is a lot of alternatives to leverage some of the non-food plant-based material can be also applied to the product design. So there are not two way for SMEs reference.
Another question is for Orion, but I do have something to add on that question because this is very important for Taiwanese company to join those global networks, including GCCA, and also like to ask what's you expect? Is there any special role for the government or the government can help the industries to join that, or it's purely by the private companies or private connection?
Thank you for those questions. I'll go in a row and address that last. So your first question was how can we learn from this experience? I think first and foremost I would like to say I think we should or we can learn from one another. Sometimes it's the blind leading the blind. No one has the absolute solution. So I think it's a two-way street always, like where we look at. So learning from one another. I would love to what we have in Switzerland. We have lots of delegation visits. Theme-based delegation visits, be it in the waste to energy or being in mobility and transportation and so on. So tours that come from abroad and get to see and get to talk to stakeholders, opinion leaders in Switzerland and see installations. I would love to, and I think that comes back into probably the GDPO office. If there's demand driven by the local people, by the local entrepreneurs for something like that, that they could tie in with a GDPO and that could be a delegation like that organized. I'd be very happy to be a counterpart in Switzerland and welcome a delegation like that. And that runs on various levels. One is Cleantech as a private association, but also from the government that welcomes visiting delegations like that. It's part of Presence Swiss, Switzerland Promotion Agency as well. That was the first question. The second question, how could we, and I just look at my notes here, basically opportunities in Switzerland. I think what I mentioned is anything to do with energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is absolutely key that we can tap into. And again, I look at it as joint ventures is probably a way to go. Coming back to my example with the SAM group now, and I'll be very honest with you from perspective of this person. I know these people are a bit anxious as well, going now with their developments. And as I shown you some of the slides, I couldn't put into the handouts. They're still confidential. But I think to gain that trust among one another and do a joint venture and even give part of the IP or part of the license for an Asian market out after that and go together forward, I think that's the way to go. In tapping into opportunities. In terms of specific areas, renewable energy, solar is definitely on the rise, wind is on the rise in Switzerland as well. And building technologies, anything that makes a building smarter than, as I said, an average coffee maker is very welcome. Then your question with regards of what the government can do, I think the cleantech clusters that we tie in with GCCA are of course, I think it comes down to can the cluster survive, and how is this cluster funded? And there, I think it's the government's role to help the local cluster to get the manpower and the resources they need to work with the cleantech companies locally, and then be able to join GCCA. GCCA is not expensive. GCCA, a membership GCCA costs you $2,500 per year, so that can't be the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, probably because I was trained as a chemical engineer, but in the past many years I work on the renewable energy. So I can have two very important questions for Professor Gutter. The first is talk about especially for your past experience about when we talk about the fossil fuel, renewable energy, and the energy efficiency. The very important factor behind it is how to internalize those external costs. do you think, especially for including the people's health, do you think this special way we haven't done good enough, even including the regulations, to put the things into a much more reasonable situation, so we can have gradually change or paradigm shift to make the much more reasonable application of a different kind of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And my second question is, you have a visit E3. We work on a lot of different kind of research on renewable energy. But since I had been the Deputy General Director of that laboratories, I personally believe we expect one special technology and we need a big breakthrough to put everything or to help all the renewable energy. It's energy storage. Do you think we are going to have a breakthrough, or what we can expect from the storage for renewable energy for the next 10 or 20 years?
Excuse me. Can I also propose two questions and they can answer at the same time? I would like to propose one question to Alan, because I think most of the audience will be very interested about United States position for the governmental policy and the climate policy. By 2020, according to your perception or your personal comment, what do you see that the United States government, especially the president, whether the climate policy toward the global future international policy framework will be changed very rapidly or very significantly? So that is the question for you. And then another question for Florian is regarding to this gentleman asked about the SME here in Taiwan. We know we have a lot of very brilliant super SME. They have produced, invented a lot of very excellent green product, can be regarded as quite promising clean tech. We have already talked about the electric bike in Switzerland. What will be your suggestion for those kind of SME? What kind of channel then they can maybe, for example, create some connection with you organizations, have some bilateral cooperation between Chinese SME clean tech company and some of your member in your cluster? What will be your suggestion for the Taiwanese very brilliant SME? How they explore the potential business without the government's support? How can they do that? Just like your cluster has already done in Switzerland.
Okay, well, thank you for the questions over here. With respect to the first question on fossil fuel, renewable energy, energy efficiency, the cost, to me that's the key. I think that's going to be the real. If we can capture those costs, and part of that, Niven had in his presentation, you did have that one figure where you were looking at taking those costs. It was clearly the Taiwan case, and that was an example where we're really looking what are those costs. And right now, I tend to joke that we tend to privatize profit and socialize risk over here. And in a sense, that was the point, Niven, that you were getting at. And I think what we really need to do with respect to the regulations is to, lay it out in that framework that is that really what we are trying to do, is to socialize that risk and to pass that off to the government, to the consumers, to others who are really not making those choices. And I think it's critical that we start getting that message out to the regulators to have them change, where we stand. And if we do that and are able to incorporate those costs, be it in something very sort of fuzzy the way I said it, or maybe more data-oriented the way Niven had it in his presentation, I think that would go a long way to changing the discussion, and by having something that really is maybe more of a database discussion. I think that would help tremendously. But getting that point across that we have failed to incorporate that, those costs. So, where do we stand on it? Unfortunately, we don't. We've not looked at it. We've not tried to capture those true costs. And often it's for historical reasons. We often have promoted energy exploration, given tax credits for things like that, and we need to try to change those policies. So I think that's a critical point that will really that will be the big paradigm shift, I think, in terms of green technologies and renewable energy, if we can capture those costs and really look at those. With respect to energy storage, we've made great strides with battery technologies, other types of, if you look at what you're doing with ITRI and some of the work, for example, with hydrogen production. I mean, hydrogen to me is a great storage mechanism for renewables. So there are many, looking at it many different ways. What's going to be the breakthrough? Well, I wish I knew. I think we all wish we knew what the breakthrough would be, but obviously we've made some great changes over there for the energy storage issues. I mean, so one of the things that was brought up was the issue of data centers. One good part about data centers is, that you need the energy for cooling. The good news is that occurs during the day when solar is maximum. So that's actually a case where we can start implementing. You're not having to worry about storage itself, but direct implementation with minimal impact on the grid, and we can start doing things. So unfortunately, with respect to your question, I don't have an answer to that one. But obviously there are many technologies that are being developed with respect to storage at all different levels over here that can help. And part of it, I think, is going to be the coupling of all these different systems and more advanced computing and control. I think that's going to. We may not even need the physical hardware. We may actually need more of a software aspect to help that. So I think that will make a big difference. And then before I turn it over to Florian over here, where's the U.S. going and the U.S. policy? The U.S., as you all know, is not the most functional government at times. I think we all saw that. I was in Washington during the shutdown. It was very nice. You can get around. Hotels and restaurants were empty. But I feel very, very hopeful. You look at some of the president's policies with respect to CO2 emissions. That's going in the right direction. I happen to have had the very fortunate opportunity to meet Gina McCarthy, who is the new head of EPA. I met her before she was nominated. And it was talking with her on energy issues. And she understands fundamentally the link, the co-benefits of, addressing pollution and addressing CO2, climate forces over here through energy policy. So she got that. And she is the first person I've spoken with at EPA who fully understands the energy aspect and how that, how addressing energy will address the co-benefits of climate and environmental impacts. So I feel very positive in terms of the team that the U.S. currently has in EPA. And given the current dysfunction in the U.S. system, I think we're going to see a lot more that's going to come down by executive order, where the president comes out and says, this is what I'm going to do, versus through legislation. Because legislation, nothing seems to be getting through. I mean, if you look at the U.S. Congress, it has renamed 14 post offices and voted to repeal Obamacare 42 times. That's not a very great track record in terms of having anything useful. So you're going to see a lot more that's going to come down by executive order. And given somebody like Gina McCarthy at EPA where she is, given what's going on at the Department of Energy, I feel that that's really, we're going to see a lot more happen over the next few years, especially since the president, is limited to 2 terms. It's going to be the end. He doesn't have to run again. He doesn't have to be popular. He can do these different things. And I really, for once, I'm very optimistic, and I think we're going to see some major changes. And we're not going to see regression at all. We're going to see progress over there. So, yeah.
And sorry.
Before Florian, probably I would like to add one thing because in the past 3 or 4 years, I got a chance to study, to read a lot of things from the ACEEE, American Council for Energy Efficiency Economy. Actually, last year I got a chance to visit their headquarters and even to meet their president of Dr. Nadell. I believe, because general impression people in Taiwan will say, American waste a lot of energy, but actually ACEEE did a lot of things, and there are some very good stories and good practice in different states, like California.
Right. I was just going to raise that.
Vermont. Very great.
You look at California and you look at the built environment. In other words, you look at housing and office buildings over there. They use 40% less energy, for the built environment in California than they do for the rest of the country, all because of regulations, efficiency, things that are put in place. You may not be able to notice it, but I have a New York accent over here. So if you know differences in American accents, mine is from New York, and I grew up in New York City, and you look at data for New York City versus the suburban area just outside New York City, so you're in the same climatic zone over there, New York City versus Long Island, so you don't have different temperatures. That's another case where if you live, per capita, they use about 1/3 of the energy in New York City than they do on Long Island. Again, it's a measure of housing, how people live, public transportation. So between energy, a lot of the local level, states like California, Vermont, as you say, other areas, we are starting to see differences, and energy efficiency has a tremendous impact over there. So,
sure. Thank you. To answer Mr. Young's question in terms of how to help, and I have no doubt that there's a promising pipeline of clean technologies coming out of Taiwan, help them access the Swiss market. We have the same challenge on the other end, obviously. I think I would like to probably look at two things. I think essentially it's a communication challenge. It's a dialogue challenge, and we spoke about this on Wednesday evening as well. I think we need the middleman. The middleman is the most important man in this game, because I think we have to, on a meta level, on a high level, we have to put a certain systematic to it. So how can we know of clean and green technologies that are beyond greenwashing, that really have a bit of meat to the bone and stake the claim that they make? And I think for that, very nice example from the GDPO, their classic awards that I've been able to witness this week. So really sourcing through this technology and nominating the best of class, and then helping them to communicate and match those with the demand in other marketplaces. So I think my first recommendation is really talk to your local organizations like a GDPO, and join a local organization like a GDPO, and get them aware of what you do, and get that word out. And then and we see this on the example of our collaboration already with Swiss Cleantech. It's really a collaboration on this meta level between clusters, that we share information in a systematic way before we then bring the two players together. And once we have the two players together, we have to let them go, because that's not our job after all then to do that. The second aspect to this question, though, I would say too, is it feeds back to a policy level. So essentially, if I look at Switzerland, if I look at our ambitious CO2 goals by 2020 to reduce by 20% to 1990 levels, and now we're looking at a life cycle analysis approach. We're looking also at the gray energy, embedded energy. Then we would have to take that into account and say, oh, how is this particular product been produced, and how much energy has been put into, how does it operate, and how is it performing, even while being decommissioned. So in that, I think that closes the loop back to Taiwan as well, where on a policy level and a governmental level, it's very important to look at how are these green products produced, and how is the overall energy balance. And that makes it then possible for a country like Switzerland with very aggressive CO2 targets as well to actually be able to buy it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
那个谢谢主席哈，那个我想请问一下那个黄总，那个您有提到那个外部成本内部化，那从另外一反向来看的话，您说建议这个台湾的一些 SMEs 怎么样所谓内部资本外部化？或许您在后面的 slides 也有提到了哈。另外一个，您或许已经成型了，就是说那个10个 sustainability 的 mega forces， 如果说把那个第6个，请问一下哈，这可能在盒子之外，把第6个那个 wealth 改成 health 的话，是否整个一个 chapters 都会有所变化？请问一下，Can I ask you, honorable guest from USA? You mentioned about the delivery issues. You mentioned about in your slides. You mentioned about the delivery issues in general. The merchant, the businessmen, they wanted to buy cheap but sell dear. Has anything to do with the present situation? Many capitalists they build factories everywhere, but it takes a long distance to ship to the consumption, the spot. Can you say something about that? And 最后 last and least, can I ask the gentleman from Switzerland, for the 10 focus groups, I think it's number 9, the co-generation. Do they have anything to do with the resources, recycling, or just you named it on it? The Switzerland clean tech on the slide. The number 9, co-generation. Or even they have anything to do with resource reusage. Thank you.
Okay, your first question you want to ask is about how the SME to respond to this kind of internalize the externality.
您已经提到非常好，就是说所谓外部成本要内部化，是国际的趋势。但是另外一个反向思考，一向您这个非常在行的，怎么样如果成为 no house 以后，所谓内部的资本成为资本，然后外部化，可不可以提供一些 tips？ 谢谢。
内部 internal capital. Actually, the current trend is we encourage the company to look at the 6 capital. The 6 capital include, the first one is manufacturing capital. Some of the technology you have and the process, whether that is efficient or not. The second one is financial, that is the traditional capital. The third one is the human capital, that is the talents, the company's internals, the human resources. Because we have a focus on a lot of resource productivity for quite a long time. But right now, it's just time to check whether that the capacity building internally to be able to respond to the external emerging challenges, so then your company could take a very immediate action to respond. And then number 4 is the nature capital. So this is regarding to the company should quantify, no matter that is a big, medium or small sizes of enterprise here in Taiwan, because Taiwan is, we have a lot of resources scarcity is the issue. So we gotta measure the natural capitals that have been utilized internally, and then we got to be ready for communicate those kind of information and how to minimize the natural capitals utilization. And then the other one is intellectual property, the intellectual capital, and the last one is the social capital. So the six capital right now, we have already encouraged the company should look at those kind of capital one by one, because those are all relevant to the technology information innovation, internal management innovation, quantify or qualitative innovation, and then how you can measure the performance and how you are going to communicate with those capital. So right now, if you look at the latest challenge, the latest development for how the company to communicate your capital utilization with your external stakeholder, especially investor. So these six capitals, internal six capital utilization, quantify, and how you can put it into become a marketing or the business language and communicate with the stakeholder. So that will be the new very important development. So this is six capital, but we got to focus on the internal management, just like my conclusion in the last is get measure, get done. If you measure your performance, you quantify, then you can have a continuous improvement, and you will have a quantitative information, qualitative information for the further communication. And the second question is regarding to replace the wealth issue by the health issue. Why we define the 10 mega forces is there is one very important point is those mega forces is the common issue for all of the sectors. So health issue, of course, is a very important issue. But comparing to the wealth, maybe I can add more explanation. What does that mean? The wealth means in the next 2 decades, there are more than 2 billion people. The middle class will be generated globally. Most of them, around more than 50% of the new middle classes will be generated in Asia, especially China and India. So why we put this wealth on as the very important mega force? Because that means what? That means market, the future potential market for the new middle classes, and that has to be taken into account because the population is so huge. It means the market is so huge. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. To answer your question, I can give you 3 examples of which I know of. One of it being very close to the town I was born. It's a paper mill that's now being powered by waste to energy facility, essentially. The other one is use of excess heat in a local or nearby hothouse. It's a bit of an interesting site. You have a waste to energy facility and a hothouse next to it, but works perfectly fine. And in general, a lot of the heat is used to power the facility right there, so they don't have to add additional power to it and use actually what they would have as a waste product otherwise. Thank you.
Just because I saw the time's up sign. Probably we should close this morning's section, and we really appreciate the 3 of our speakers. Actually, I'll quote the conclusion from the very famous booklet from UNEP called Green Economy. It mentioned between now and the year of 2030, probably if we have our determination to do something, it urges all of our government or all of our people to invest 1 to 2% of our GDP on things to promote green economy. I think there's no such things like a free lunch. We have to make our determination, invest on the right things. Then, as Nathan said, probably hopefully not until 2020. but we need to invest certain kind of things, even sacrifice some of our things now, then we can enjoy the big fruit of the green economy or green technology. I think we really appreciate three of our speakers give us a different aspect of this very important issue about the next chances for our green economy, our green product, green services. Let's thank our speakers again. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.